welcome to our speaker, Alex Wall, who is Director of Markland Architects. And what was really lovely was just having, working with an architect that was so great at giving really helpful feedback. And I think that that's helpful from our perspective at Forza, but also for clients. So Alex seemed like the perfect, yeah, I know, it's quite tricky, yeah. You should just change your name to Richard.
We are changing. Oh, change my name to Richard, yeah.
Yeah, and then it would be much easier, wouldn't
Much
it?
easier.
To invite Alex along to have participate in our RC Experts. So we'll be doing this series throughout September and hopefully be able to pick it up into October and for the rest of the year. Because I do think lots of people have lots of questions and sometimes they think, oh, does that seem like a silly question, or should I, how to go about asking it? So there's never a silly question, that's what I say as well. So Alex, perhaps you could just let everyone know a little bit about your background and the practice, and then we can dive into some questions.
Okay, yeah. So going way back, I graduated from the RCA, the Royal College of Art. Since then, we were working on predominantly commercial side, commercial work, and then in around, I think it was 2017, we pivoted towards the high-end residential area, and it's an area we've always wanted to be involved in, and we've got an opportunity to build a house over in Richmond, circa 10 million, and then now that has kind of been our focus is on the domestic side of projects. We do everything from landscape design, interior design, and the architecture, and the reason we quite like the domestic side is you're actually working with a client whose home it is, and they're going to be living in it, and the passion that they bring to it, and just the enjoyment that they're going to have living in there for the foreseeable is kind of a really important thing for us.
And you're all in Forza's showroom, so just to give you a bit of background about Forza. Forza have been established for 25 years in the design space, primarily starting with furniture and slowly expanding into different pieces for the home as well as commercial spaces and now kitchens. So we work with various leading manufacturers, Pedini, Valcucina and Hacker, some of them that we work with regularly to deliver beautiful kitchens for everyone's homes. And our business is different in the sense of we're led by our customers, so we really focus on designing for you and for your home and how you're going to actually use the space and make the most of it. So there's a definite synergy between ourselves, and which is why hopefully these events will help people sort of see what they can achieve with working with an architect and working with a company like Forza to really deliver something quite spectacular in their home. So I think I'll kick us off with maybe some questions, and then we can put it out to you guys if you have any questions that you would also like to ask. So I think that probably the number one question, I think, when it comes to working with an architect is, when do you engage with an architect? How early on should you go and speak to an architect?
It is always nice to have a clear brief and an idea of what you want, but we're more than happy to work with clients who aren't necessarily sure what they want. So it could be right at the very beginning of a project. We have a process where we start to develop a brief with you, try and understand kind of what is not working with your house, or what is working with your house and what you might like to improve on your house. So kind of the earlier the better, really. You don't necessarily need a fixed idea in your head of what you want. It's always nice when you've got a clear brief and you go, okay, well, yeah, we can do that for you, but we're there to help you figure out what you want. And so yeah, the kind of earlier the better for us.
Yeah, we often say that as well, as it's always helpful to start early on, because it's a process, isn't it? It's not, I don't think anybody necessarily walks in day one and what they walked in telling you is actually what comes out at the other end. We often see that the design process evolves, because the more that you spend time thinking about various elements, whether it's the build itself or for us specifically kitchens, more comes out of it,
yeah.
and those conversations develop into sort of more opportunities for design.
Yeah, it's the opportunities, because this isn't our house, this is your house.
Yeah. And
that's why you need to be fully involved in that design process, and that it's a conversation, and out of that will come your house eventually. And so yeah, it's very much about that collaborative effort to create something that's unique for that person.
Perfect. Any questions anybody would like to chime in?
No. So one of the trends, Alex, that you see emerging in home design going forward, do you think it's things like energy efficiency or sustainable materials, or what do you think is going to be important for the future?
Well, I think something that has to be important for the future, full stop, is the sustainability side of thing, and that is something we always bring up with our clients fairly honest. do you want to future-proof your house? Where are you on, where do you stand on the kind of sustainability side of things? So that is 100% the main one that we see throughout every single project.
Is it something you actively encourage or suggest to them, or you take the lead from there?
Absolutely. So in the initial brief for the consultation, that is just on our checklist to bring up is sustainability, how we can improve your home, how we can do your bit for not just the planning in terms of your energy consumption, but how your building can be a positive, for example, biodiversity, how we can integrate planting or green roofs or rainwater harvesting to actually give back to the environment. Yeah, very, very important.
And do you think there's more options open to people that, previously I think people kind of felt a little bit afraid of trying to put sustainability probably at the higher end of the list of priorities, because it might seem a little off-putting that it's cost prohibitive or it's going to cost them more.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't cost. We sort of say average sort of 4 to 5% more kind of on your build cost to add the extra stuff, more sustainable side of things. But also one key thing is it isn't as ugly as it used to be. Most people just assume that sticking a load of solar panels on your house and that made it sustainable. We actually rarely put solar panels on our buildings. If you look at the UK, when do you need your power? It's in your evening when everyone's like boiling the kettle for Coronation Street and the break of Coronation Street. When is the sun out? Well, very rarely in the UK is the sun out, but it's definitely not out at 7:30 in the evening. So it's more about minimising the amount of energy you're using in the first place. So highly insulated buildings, creating passive designs to prevent solar gain, natural ventilation. And all of those are kind of hidden. It's all part of the actual design. It's not just something that's stuck on.
Yeah.
And so, it's a lot more accessible now. Things are cheaper. Solar panels are cheaper. And you've got air source heat pumps. The government are going to be banning gas boilers in the near future. So these are all things that need to be considered now. And it's much more accessible.
Brilliant. Well, that was one of my questions actually, was about sustainability, so thank you very much. I think probably something that's a hot topic at the moment is planning permission, and obviously due to COVID there's been significant delays to that, just as in many businesses with staffing and such. But I think, I know certainly we had some questions about how involved does your architect become in the planning, or do you need somebody separate to work with to gain planning permission?
It very much depends on what kind of project you have. We are fortunate enough to have 100% record in securing planning consent, but on large projects we've also worked with specific planning advisors. So if you're, for example, there's what's known as a paragraph 79 house in the countryside. If you're doing something which has got no real precedent in the area, then I'd definitely have a planning advisor for something like that.
And you would advise your clients at that time to engage with,
exactly.
Brilliant.
But for your traditional London extensions or new builds within just built-up areas, I don't think you necessarily need a separate planning consultant. You just need a team that have got good experience of planning, and your architect should be able to do that.
Yeah, and that's something. Do you think that's a good question to ask at the sort of outset when you're kind of speaking to an architect? Is like, what's their experience in that?
Yeah, I mean, most people seem to be terrified of planning, and there are lots of things you can do without needing to go to planning through permitted development. But there's nothing to be scared of about planning. So long as you're not doing anything completely crazy, and
building
your
a windmill.
There's
one in Brixton, so you know. So long as you're doing something sensible and you've got precedent and you tick off all those policies. We go slightly overboard than most architects on the planning side of things. We replaced an architect on a project out in Suffolk, and their design and access statement, which is essentially a little report that goes along with planning, was about 7 pages of A4. Ours is 30 pages of A3, and we go right back looking at the history of the building. So we're going back to the 1800s where it was first built, established where the footprint of the original building was, and that's actually where our extension is now going. They were rejecting it based on the fact that they didn't think the extension should go there. And it's just that extra depth that we go to that helps us. You can never promise planning. No.
But it gives you the best opportunity to get.
Yeah, well, you're starting from a good position, aren't you,
exactly.
really, of planning.
Sorry, would you have like a rough estimate of how often out of 10, how often you actually succeed with the planning?
Well, we've got 10 out of 10 from everything from a small, extension through to 340,000 square foot of offices.
That's amazing.
So yeah, we've been I was actually lucky, but you put in that work, and you just essentially you're building up a case where you want the planners to be unable to sort of almost argue against it and then go, no, actually, yeah, this is perfectly fine. They've checked through all the policy, their rights to light, everything. You just want to have a nice dense pack. You want to go like put that on their desk, and then so
That's good to know.
that's our kind of one of our unique selling points is that we've got so far 100% plan.
Kind of almost, I'm going to take a step back, and you touched on it earlier, which was a brief, like how to put together a good brief for your architect. So, I mean, obviously, like you said, you may come into it and you have an idea of what you would like, but is there some pointers that are a sort of good starting point of how to think about putting together your starting brief for your architect?
Yeah, so you've got your kind of like practical things where, I want 4 beds, all with ensuite, guest bedroom, something like that, and you can tick those practical things off. But there's almost the emotive side of things, what you want your house to feel like, or how you want to live in your house. You can say that I love entertaining, therefore I want a more sociable kitchen. So you don't necessarily need the practical, I want an extension here. It's more what you're trying to get out of it, because you may say you want an extension, but we could actually potentially just reconfigure the house, and it's actually a more cost-effective, less contentious planning way of actually coming about it. So for us, it's more what you're trying to get out of the work.
Yeah.
That's more important for us. So it doesn't need to necessarily be exactly
Like an
prescribed.
Yeah, I think that sometimes can put people off, because we often, as well with kitchens, again, you have that where they're like, do I need to know exactly, how I want it all configured? And we're like, no, that's part of our job, is to help you work through that. And if you said like, I want to entertain lots, then we'll kind of know, this is the best way to utilize a space to have that happen for you. So
and
I think that's
plenty of time. When you're designing and building buildings, there's plenty of time to actually make those decisions. So nothing ever at the beginning of a project is rock solid. We worked at RBA stages, so 1 to 7. You actually you start building at stage 5. So we've got all of those previous stages to actually develop what is going to happen. So we are slightly different as architects. We actually use gaming and special effects software.
I was just going to come to that actually, of how you visualize your project.
Yeah, so we don't really understand. Houses are like people's biggest outlay. They're spending millions of pounds on these properties, and when you're presented with a series of line drawings and going, here's what your house will look like, and you're going to be spending 500 grand on it, we just don't think that's acceptable, especially with the technology available now. So we use gaming and special effects software to create a virtual version of your property. So you can pop on a headset, you can stand in your room, you can stand in your kitchen, you can do the washing up, you can sit down at your dining table, and we can then change the walls to green, to blue, to yellow. We can change the lighting and show you exactly what's going on. So again, it comes back to being involved in that design process. You can see what's happening, you can see all the different options, and you can be confident in what you're getting, essentially. Because it is what you see in front of you is the model that we use to produce all our information. So it's accurate to 0.001 of a millimeter. So that is what you're going to get.
Amazing.
And so the thing we hear most is, it looks just like the visualizations.
Yeah.
And we're like, okay, well, that's good. And it does take a little bit of the surprise away, but it's kind of changing your mind during construction is always costly. If you can have, and you're confident in what you want, then
those steels have gone up. You're kind of like, that could be a bit tricky to move
tricky,
things
costly
up.
to change, and you get that from the contractor.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think so. Yeah, I think it's so important to be able to visualize something, because a lot of times it is very emotive. It's very like, I quite like this finish, but sometimes you're seeing something in a very, especially for kitchens, you're seeing something in quite a small sample, and it's really hard to visualize a whole island in a material. So we do the same thing, that we do visualizations for our clients so that they can really have a feel and understand the feel and look of their kitchen, because like you said, once things are ordered and it's all made, it's all very, very difficult to change things at that point.
Whilst it's all still imaginary.
Yeah, we can change things, and your imagination,
exactly.
Absolutely, your imagination can go wild at that point.
And those samples are still important, because you do want that physical sample just to feel in reality, feel how feel how it feels. But then combined with the VR, combined with the visualizations, know exactly what you're getting.
Yeah, and I think that that's, like you said, it does take some of that kind of like amazing, you know, grand design moments of when, you know, you're walking in and like, look at this space, but it's, you want it to be right ultimately for the client. Amazing. So I don't know if any other questions from anyone?
I just wondered in what point you guys, you personally now, when would you integrate furniture in your conversations, or do you guys do that at all, or is that then a separate department?
So we do that right at the beginning. So the initial stage, after the brief, we'll start doing some concept layouts. So that's all in 2D, and because we want to forget about 3D for a bit. 3D is distracting, and we just want to make sure that it functions and flows correctly. So we'll have various different options with different kitchen layouts or different furniture options and layouts, and we'll combine that with a precedent study. So again, like we were saying, we don't ever want to show anyone just line drawings. We'd always show a visual element to it so that all our clients can understand what we're talking about. So say if we've got crystal doors just denoted on a drawing, we'll have images of crystal doors for them to refer to. So yeah, right from the very beginning we'll have furniture, because that's part of how people live there. The architecture is only as good as when someone can live in it. So yeah, right from the very beginning we'll always have those layouts.
Amazing. And then sort of getting quite kitchen specific, as we're surrounded by kitchens. How involved do you get in terms of the design of the kitchen, or do you, how do you guys work with that element of it?
Kind of depends, because some people I want a gang in our kitchen. And I go, okay, I'll come to like you guys, and then you guys do your thing.
Yeah.
And then there are others where we're like, okay, no, we want a bespoke kitchen, or we want something slightly different, or it's very much kind of up to the client. We've detailed kitchens right to the nth degree, and then they've been built on site or built off site. The carpet is kind of, so again, yeah, it's as much as kind of the client wants us to be, but we'll do the initial concept layouts, what we think works best, and then come to one of you guys
to take it to that sort of final stage. No. Did you have a question?
It was kind of a bit off topic, but I just wondered how COVID affected you in your practice.
Yeah, so designing is so collaborative, and that's very hard, I think, to do over Zoom necessarily.
Yeah.
Obviously, we did it over Zoom, but yeah, that's particularly difficult. When also a lot of our clients are from abroad, and so when they can't go over to the UK, then that's quite difficult. So there were, again, with the gaming side of things, we create virtual walkthroughs that you guys could access online, and you can walk around them with your little mouse and go and actually see what your building still looks like. So we're still able to communicate at that. And then we also started working with small domestic clients, as everyone was starting to do up their house. So we're like, well, we probably should help them do that. And so yeah, pivoted to the smaller side of things, and we love working with those clients, and they really appreciate the work we do. So we're definitely going to keep working with them in the future. But yeah, I think COVID was challenging for everyone, but there are certain outcomes from those challenges which I think are beneficial to our business. And
yeah, I think it's probably made everyone have to adapt a little bit differently to how we all work, really.
And do you collaborate with a lot of different artisans and things like that sometimes in projects?
Yeah, so
specialist areas.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
like what kind of people?
So if an architect kind of has to be a jack of all trades, but also a very good delegator in choosing certain surface finishes, like we were talking about the micro cement finishes or something like that, or metal workers or fabricators. It's important that you go to the right people for the right elements. Like that's why you come to you guys for kitchens. And so yeah, we delegate to the right sort of people. Everything from carpet design, rug design, wallpapers, anything, everything. We need to be the collector of everyone else's knowledge and bring it into one place so that everyone can then build from it. So it's important to go to the experts for the appropriate.
Yeah. And I've got another question.
No, go for it. That's what we're here for.
What are your offices like? What's the setup, and like where is it and things
So
like that?
we're East London based. We're in an old converted pill factory.
What factory?
Pill factory.
Oh really?
Yeah. And so there's lots of chemical symbols on the thing. They're big giant pills to sit on in the gardens outside. We're quite tech focused, so we've all got VR heads. So we've got 2 big monitors, very, very big, horrible looking machines that have brutes that can power all the graphics side of things. Headsets. So we can just pop on anytime we're designing something, we can see what it looks like. And yes, it's quite nice. Although no air conditioning.
And how many
Oh
people?
well, you're in good company.
Yeah, no air conditioning.
How many people in practice?
So we're 4 at the moment, and we're growing. Unfortunately, after COVID, we did have to reduce a little bit, and then so now we're building back up
Cool,
again.
cool, cool.
We're hiring at the moment as well. It's good.
Good.
Amazing. I think one of the other questions, unfortunately our other guests couldn't make it, but just to touch on it is, and I think you kind of have of working with the other trades, but in terms of that main contractor relationship, I would imagine that it's quite important to have a good working relationship with the client's main contractor. Now, how I can imagine it's different in different circumstances, that the client may already have somebody in mind that they want to use, but do you also help maybe that process of identifying a main contractor?
Yeah, absolutely. You need to have a good relationship with your contractor. If anyone tells you there aren't problems on site, they're lying. There are always problems, but you need to have that team that don't just go, "That's not my problem." You need to have a team that works together, and that was more so right when we were beginning at COVID. Sorry, when we were building right at the start of COVID, when no one had any idea what was going on. We all just had to muck in to try and figure out how did we finish this building. So yeah, we definitely help. We know contractors we work with, then there's contractors we want to work with, who want awards to the certain buildings. We actually, traditionally, on a traditional contract, you'll go out at the end of stage 4, so that's when we've technically drawn everything, got everything on paper, and that's when we go out to tender, and we'll interview contractors, check their insurance, check their past projects, and then advise you on who we think is appropriate. However, I've always thought that's kind of stupid. Why would I spend 2 years designing a building, then have to hand it over to a contractor who then has to build that within a month? He's got to get everything that's been in my brain, that I put on paper, into his brain, and then start building. We like to get contractors on board earlier and actually start the technical detailing with them. So it's kind of a 2-stage tender process, and it just means you start with, start on site with all the knowledge kind of there. Yeah. And it really helps smooth out the process, just because you'll have all agreed your subcontractors way before, because often we'll specify a certain subcontractor, but that might not be a subcontractor that they use. Okay. And then we've got to change all the details to kind of work with them. So it wastes the client's money, wastes time, and it might not also be the end result that you've originally shown to your client. Yeah. So if you can bring those contractors on board earlier, work that through with them, life's much easier.
And do you think also it helps, we're talking about COVID, that across the sort of construction industry, there's lots of delays and things at the moment, and doing it in that way can stop the kind of, well, yes, we'd love to work with you and everything is great, but actually we don't have any space in it to do anything for 12 months. So then...
Yeah, exactly. So that's what we had. The reason we started doing this is because we had finished technically detailing the project in February. We start on site next week. And he is the right contractor for the job. So, the client was happy to wait. But yeah, because, it depends on what size of project it is, but you'll have 8, 10, 12, how many weeks it is, technical detailing, but that's then time for them to go, okay, no, we're not ready now, but potentially in 3 months, or they can then plan ahead to have that next job. So yeah, again, that's one of the reasons we're trying to...
Yeah, it does make sense, because like you said, those sorts of things are, like, there is always inevitably something, you don't know until you begin the building process.
Particularly with old buildings.
Yeah.
If you're hammering around at old buildings, blasting through walls, you don't know what's behind them, you don't know what's under them, so there's always going to be things that crop up.
The unknown,
There's just unknowns. New buildings are much easier. There's still when you have to dig in the ground, and the amount of boreholes you do, you'll always miss something. We found a humongous tank under one of the buildings, and then the jackhammer was just hammering into this thing, everyone hating it because there's noise reverberating around the things, and obviously it costs a load more because they had to try and excavate it, but it's just happened that all the boreholes just missed this massive tank because there's only so many borehole tests you can do.
Yeah. No, I can imagine. Yeah, that must have been a fun one for the client to be told. Like, oh, by the way, there's a big tank.
It's also the worst time for clients because they'll have spent, a quarter of their budget, and all they've got is a big muddy hole.
Yeah, it's awful at that point.
And then then you just go, oh, they're going to spend another 200 grand trying to do this, and what? And they've got nothing to show for it, which is when the VR comes back and you go, no, look, here it is, or we'll hold the augmented reality up and go, look, that's what's going to be your building, and then things calm down a little bit. Yeah. But that is always the worst time. I guarantee you on the client happiness scale, it's when we start building and you've just got a muddy hole. Every time.
The level is very low at
Every
that
time,
point.
yeah.
I was going to ask about what you're sort of seeing as, not as trends, but as what people are choosing to do more. Let's sort of pick the London area that we're in. Obviously spaces at a premium. Do you find that people are just doing, you know, the standard kind of extension with a larger kitchen living area, or is there a lot more people going down? Because there was a trend at one point of digging downwards and kind of having that stepped out, you know, kitchen that you then step up into your garden.
Yeah.
So what's the sort of things that you're seeing coming across the practice now?
A real mix, like Kensington is sort of going against those big old basements and stuff like that at the moment, so there's less of those that we're replacing, but it kind of really varies from client to client. It depends, and a lot is basically the most recent experience they've had of COVID is if they are working from home, then they might not have had office space, then they want office space, or they want a space that they can actually close off. So it's a slight, you know, they call it broken plans. It's a slight rejection of the former completely open plan. They want to be able to, you know, slide doors off, so, slide areas off. So yeah, we've got a lot more pocket sliding doors, panels which just look like walls, which are on little pivot hinges, which you pop out and then you can close. So it's more about kind of adaptable spaces and being able to make their home work for them, you know, in the best way possible.
Yeah, and literally working from home, because I do think that is something that we see as a trend moving forward is
and again,
that
one
mixture. Absolutely. Well, any other questions? Sure.
I think you touched on it a little bit, Maya, with delays with projects. Are you finding delays with materials and things like that? And does that make you mindful with planning, you know, whether you don't use that certain material and you go with something else?
Yeah. So the contractor was waiting 8 weeks for a piece of glass. Like, what can you do if they're on that? But we try and promote timber as it's the most sustainable kind of material that we've got. It absorbs all the carbon, and it is a lot safer in terms of fire than the regulations would suggest. But now lumber prices just last month, I think it was 23-25% more expensive, and so yeah, those are absolutely considerations that, you know, we're having to think about now. And there's only so much you can kind of do. With these supply bottlenecks is, okay, right, let's use less timber because that's going to be too expensive, then we'll use blockwork. But then, okay, blockwork is not sustainable, it's concrete, and the use of cement is, I think, accounts for 8% of global emissions, I think, something like that. And so then we've got to, so what do we use? And yeah, these are all things we have to try and consider and explain them to the client, going, this is why we want to do this is the outcome of this, or this is the outcome of that. But yeah, it's just difficult at the moment. And again, prices. Clients always go, how much is it going to cost?
I was just going to touch, my last sort of questions was around budgets, because that's always you know, how it's like kind of, I suppose at the beginning, how long is a piece of string?
Exactly.
Because until you finish the whole sort of design process, you can't cost it.
So we have like rules of thumb that we go by, but now those are even going sort of out the window because of these huge fluctuations in price. But yeah, and we can give you ballpark ideas, but when we don't, you know, particularly on finishes, you could be specifying very, very expensive kitchen, we could go for a much cheaper kitchen, but we don't know that necessarily at that point, and we don't know what finishes you want. So yeah, it is at the beginning of a project, we need to get something vaguely and a vague idea of what you want before we can start putting rough prices against things.
Yeah.
But yeah, always, that's usually the first question.
Yeah, that people ask, which is a fair enough question, because it is, you know, it's like you said, it's a big chunk of money. So I suppose for people, it's to think, well, have a budget that you are willing to work within, at least to share that, because I think sometimes there's a hesitancy to share a figure, which is actually a bit counterproductive, because I think there's this feeling that everyone's going to try and get to that figure, but actually, if for us, exactly what you said about kitchens, if we know what the figure is, or ballpark, we'll make sure that we're not showing you finishes that we know will take you outside of that. So we're only going to, you know, show you things that we know will work within that budget. And I think it's probably similar that, you know, somebody might say, oh, well, I don't know, towers here or whatever, you know, something ridiculous. And you're like, well, but actually that's out of your budget. So let's do this instead. So I think that's a much better way to work for people and in your relationship with your client anyway.
Yeah, and for example, on cost, we'll always show options, and so the client's dead set on having exposed brick walls and a polished concrete floor. And I go, well, that's one of the more expensive finishes. If we did this and we showed them the other option, this will be more more aligned with your costs.
Yeah.
And they go, yeah, okay, that's fine. We want that. And fine. Then we, so long as they're aware that it's going to cost more,
Absolutely.
then that's
Because
fine.
everyone can decide where they want to weight things in their budget. So certain things may be more important to them, like that concrete floor, than perhaps other finishes in, say, the bathrooms and the guest rooms or something.
And that's where the visuals come back in again, is because we can show you that this is your cheaper option, this is the option you want, and this is your super expensive option, which so they can actually see what their decisions are. They can make those informed decisions, and they can be comfortable and happy in those decisions. So.
Amazing. Well, I don't know if I think we've covered quite a lot. And so, you know, I think thank you very much for participating and for everyone for coming. And we can share Alex's details. Do you have business cards? You can hand out to everybody and get in touch with, you know, us at Forza or Alex if you'd like to find out any more information. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll give you a little round